At 0847 on the morning of February 15th, 1944, Lieutenant Nathan Gordon banked his PBY-5, a Catalina hard right, over Kavieng Harbor, watching Japanese anti-aircraft fire erupt from every direction. 28 years old, hundreds of combat hours, 0 rescued air crew. The son of an Arkansas farmer who had never seen the ocean until he was 19, was about to change that in the next 6 hours. The morning that had begun with routine patrol orders was about to become the most extraordinary rescue mission in the history of naval aviation. 15 American airmen floated in the waters below, scattered across a harbor that bristled with Japanese guns. The strike force that had attacked Kavieng that morning had lost multiple aircraft to the devastating anti-aircraft fire that the Japanese had positioned along the waterfront. Pilots and crew members bobbed in life rafts and Mae West life jackets, watching Japanese patrol boats race toward them from the shore. The rescue that everyone assumed was impossible was about to begin. Nobody had ever attempted what Nathan Gordon was about to do. The American bombers had already completed their attack, leaving behind burning fuel dumps and damaged installations along the New Ireland coastline. Smoke rose in thick black columns that could be seen for miles. Japanese defenders were furious, vengeful, and determined to capture or kill every American who had fallen into their waters. The patrol boats were already moving, their engines churning white wakes across the harbor. But above Kavieng Harbor, Nathan Gordon was circling in a flying boat that had no business being there. The PBY Catalina was slow, ungainly, and completely defenseless against the concentrated firepower of an enemy stronghold. It was designed for long-range patrol missions, not combat rescues in the face of determined opposition. The aircraft carried a name painted on the bow, Arkansas Traveler. The artwork showed a cartoon character with a fishing pole, relaxed and carefree, exactly the opposite of what the situation demanded. That morning, the Arkansas Traveler would earn a different kind of reputation entirely. Gordon had no way of knowing whether he would survive the next hour. The mission profile called for landing in enemy waters, taxiing to downed airmen, and taking off again while Japanese gunners did everything possible to kill him. The mathematics of the situation were simple. One slow seaplane against an entire harbor full of guns. The odds favored the guns by a considerable margin that morning. Every calculation suggested that attempting a rescue would be suicide, but Nathan Gordon was not thinking about calculations. The PBY-5A Catalina was never built for this kind of mission. Consolidated Aircraft had designed it as a patrol bomber, intended to search vast stretches of ocean for enemy ships and submarines. The aircraft could stay aloft for over 24 hours, covering thousands of miles of empty water. It carried depth charges and torpedoes for attacking submarines. It had 2 50-caliber machine guns in waist blisters and a single 30-caliber in the bow turret, enough to discourage a curious enemy fighter, but nowhere near enough to suppress anti-aircraft fire from a fortified harbor. But range and endurance meant nothing if you left men to die in the water. That was the calculation Nathan Gordon made in the seconds after he heard the first distress call. Men were dying. He could help. The risk was irrelevant. Some decisions transcend mathematics, and this was one of them. For 18 months, VP-34 had flown mission after mission from their base at Samurai, a tiny island off the eastern tip of New Guinea. They had patrolled shipping lanes, searched for submarines, and occasionally bombed Japanese installations along the northern coast. The squadron had lost aircraft and crew to enemy action, mechanical failure, and the 1,000 small disasters that plagued flying operations in the South Pacific. Nathan Gordon had joined VP-34 Inches late 1943, already an experienced pilot with hundreds of hours in the Catalina. He had learned to coax the big flying boat through tropical storms, to land on seas that would have terrified a surface sailor, to operate from lagoons and harbors that barely qualified as anchorages. The skills would serve him well on February 15th, in ways he could never have anticipated. The morning had begun with routine patrol orders. Gordon's crew had launched from The strike force hit Kavieng at 0830. B-25 Mitchell medium bombers swept in at low altitude, strafing and bombing the harbor installations. A 20 Havoc attack bombers followed, targeting shipping and fuel storage facilities. P-38. Lightning fighters provided escort, tangling with Japanese interceptors that rose to defend the base. The attack was executed with precision, each aircraft following its assigned route through the carefully planned approach corridors. The attack was devastating but costly. Anti-aircraft fire from the heavily defended harbor brought down multiple American aircraft. Crews bailed out or crash-landed in the water, scattered across the harbor and the approaches to the enemy base. Within minutes, the calm waters around Kavieng became a rescue emergency of the highest order. The first distress call reached Gordon at 0842. An American crew was down in the water approximately 600 yards from the Kavieng waterfront. Japanese patrol boats were already heading toward the crash site. The survivors had minutes, not hours. If someone did not reach them immediately, they would be captured, interrogated, and almost certainly executed. Gordon did not hesitate. He pushed the throttles forward and pointed the Catalina's nose toward the harbor. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Junior Grade Ralph Crowe, began calculating the approach. The navigator, Ensign Robert Mitchell, plotted the position of the downed airmen. The radio operator, Aviation Radioman First Class Earl Kowalik, monitored the frequencies for additional calls. The crew of the Arkansas Traveler understood what they were about to attempt. Landing a seaplane in enemy-controlled waters was dangerous enough under ideal circumstances. Landing within range of concentrated anti-aircraft fire was something else entirely. Every man aboard the Catalina knew the odds, and every man stayed at his station without complaint. The harbor grew larger in the windscreen as Gordon descended. He could see the smoke from the morning's attack, the damaged installations, the patrol boats racing across the water. He could see the anti-aircraft positions on the shore, the gun crews swinging their weapons toward the approaching aircraft. He could see the life raft bobbing in the swells, tiny figures waving frantically at the sky. At 500 feet, the first tracers reached for the Catalina. Red and orange streaks curved up from the shore, falling away as the gunners misjudged the aircraft's speed and altitude. Gordon held his course, watching the water rush closer, calculating the moment when he would have to commit to the landing. 300 feet, 200, 100. The hull of the PBY touched the water in a spray of white foam. The impact slammed Gordon against his harness, but he maintained control, working the throttles and rudder to bring the aircraft to a stop. The patrol boats were 400 yards away and closing fast, their bow waves visible even from the cockpit of the wallowing seaplane. The first rescue took approximately 3 minutes. Gordon taxied the Catalina toward the life raft, fighting the swells that threatened to flip the aircraft. His bow gunner, Aviation Ordnanceman Third Class Paul West, kept his .30 caliber trained on the approaching patrol boats, ready to open fire if they came within range. The waist gunners scanned for enemy fighters that might appear at any moment. 6 men climbed aboard the Arkansas Traveler through the waist hatches, bomber crew from a B-25 that had taken a direct hit over the harbor. Some were wounded, bleeding from shrapnel injuries. All were terrified, having spent the last 10 minutes watching Japanese boats race toward them. Japanese bullets began splashing in the water around the aircraft as shore gunners found their range. Gordon advanced the throttles and began his takeoff run. A Catalina needed approximately 30 seconds of acceleration to reach flying speed 30 seconds, during which the aircraft was completely vulnerable to enemy fire. He watched the airspeed indicator climb with agonizing slowness. 40 knots, 50, 60. The hull lifted free of the water at 65 knots. Gordon held the aircraft in ground effect, building speed before climbing away from the guns. Tracers continued to reach. 6 men rescued. The Arkansas Traveler was still flying. Most pilots would have considered the mission complete and headed for home with their precious cargo of survivors. Gordon climbed to 500 feet and circled the harbor, looking for additional survivors. What he saw changed the character of the morning entirely. Smoke signals rose from 3 different locations within the harbor. More aircrew were down, scattered across miles of enemy-controlled water. The patrol boats that had chased his first landing were now heading toward the nearest group of survivors. If Gordon did not return immediately, those men would be captured or killed. He had already defied the odds once. The rational decision was to head for home, deliver the 6 men he had already rescued, and let someone else handle the remaining survivors. His aircraft had taken hits during the first landing. The crew was shaken. The Japanese gunners knew he was coming now and would be ready. Nathan.Gordon turned the Catalina back toward Kavieng Harbor. The second rescue began at 0912. Gordon spotted 3 men, clinging to wreckage, approximately 800 yards from the shore. They were closer to the guns than the first group had been. The approach would be considerably more dangerous. He began his descent with methodical precision. Same technique as before. Keep the aircraft moving. Minimize the time on the water. Trust the crew to handle their stations. The shore batteries opened fire as soon as the Catalina dropped below 300 feet. This time, the gunners had their range. Shells began exploding around the aircraft. Not tracers, the Japanese had wheeled out heavier weapons, guns capable of destroying the flying boat with a single hit. Gordon felt the concussions through the airframe, heard the distinctive crack of near misses passing close to the hull. He touched down 50 yards from the survivors and immediately began taxiing toward them. The patrol boats were closer this time, close enough that Paul West in the bow turret opened fire, sending short bursts of .30 caliber rounds across their bows to discourage a closer approach. The 3 survivors were Marines, crew from an A-20 Havoc that had gone down during the initial attack. One was badly wounded, unable to climb aboard without assistance. The waist gunners hauled him through the hatch, while Gordon kept the throttles at idle, ready to begin his takeoff. Run the instant everyone was aboard. 90 seconds on the water, the longest 90 seconds of Nathan.Gordon's life to that point. A shell exploded 30 feet off the port wing, close enough to spray the aircraft with shrapnel. The Catalina shuddered, but kept flying. Gordon slammed the throttles forward and began accelerating through the shell-churned water. The takeoff run lasted 35 seconds. Every one of them was spent waiting for the hit that would end the Arkansas Traveler's mission permanently. It never came. The gunners were close, their shells bracketing the aircraft, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. In naval aviation, you either get hit or you don't. 9 men aboard now. The aircraft was getting crowded, and the additional weight would make future takeoffs even more challenging. Gordon circled the harbor again, counting smoke signals, calculating how many more trips he would need to make. 2 more groups of survivors waited in the water. 6 men in one location, 3 in another. The morning was not over. It was bare aircraft to stop, exposing it to concentrated fire from the shore. By the time all 6 were aboard, the Catalina had taken multiple hits. The starboard engine was running rough, producing strange sounds that no pilot wanted to hear. A fuel line had been nicked, leaking aviation gasoline into the bilge. The bow turret was jammed, its traverse mechanism damaged by a near miss. Radio communications were sporadic, the antenna having taken shrapnel damage during the 3rd landing. 15 men now occupied the Arkansas Traveler. The aircraft had been designed to carry a crew of 10. 5 additional passengers stretched its capacity to the limit. The takeoff from the 3rd rescue required every foot of the harbor, the overloaded Catalina struggling to reach flying speed. The mathematics were getting worse with each rescue. More weight meant longer takeoff runs. Longer takeoff runs meant more time exposed to enemy fire. The damaged engine reduced available power. The fuel leak threatened to drain the tanks before they could reach home. Gordon could have headed home. 15 rescued aircrew represented a phenomenal achievement, the kind of mission that earned decorations and newspaper headlines. His aircraft was damaged, his crew exhausted, and the Japanese gunners had found their rhythm. Each successive landing would be more dangerous than the last. Gordon watched the end of the harbor approaching. Beyond it, open ocean. If he could not get the aircraft airborne before reaching deep water, the Catalina would settle back onto the surface, and the patrol boats would finish what the shore batteries had started. He ordered all non-essential crew to the rear of the aircraft, shifting the center of gravity to help the nose rotate. He adjusted the mixture on the starboard engine, coaxing every possible horsepower from the damaged power plant. He trimmed the aircraft for maximum lift, accepting the penalty in drag. The airspeed indicator showed 55 knots, 58, 60. The hull was still in the water. 63 knots. 65. 68. The aircraft porpoised once, twice, the spray flying higher than the wings. Gordon held the yoke steady, refusing to force the issue, waiting for the moment when physics would decide whether the Arkansas traveler lived or died. At 72 knots, 300 yards from the end of the harbor, the PBY Catalina lifted free of the water. Nathan Gordon climbed to 1,000 feet and turned southeast, away from the guns, away from the harbor, away from the death that had been reaching for him all morning. 15 rescued aircrew occupied every available space in the aircraft. The deck was slick with blood and seawater. Wounded men groaned with each bounce of the damaged flying boat through tropical turbulence. The starboard engine was producing maybe 60% power. The fuel leak had worsened during the final takeoff run. The radio was completely dead now, the antenna having torn away during the climb. Navigation would be by dead reckoning, with no ability to call for assistance if they went down. The flight from Kavieng to Samurai covered approximately 300 miles of open ocean. At the Catalina's reduced speed with one damaged engine, the trip would take nearly 3 hours. Every minute of those 3 hours would be spent wondering whether the starboard engine would hold together long enough to reach home. Gordon split his attention between the instruments and the sky, watching for Japanese fighters that might have pursued from Kavieng. None appeared. The enemy had been so focused on the shore batteries and patrol boats that they had apparently neglected to scramble interceptors. It was a mistake that saved the Arkansas traveler and everyone aboard. The Catalina droned southeast across the Solomon Sea, each mile bringing them closer to friendly territory. Gordon's crew moved among the wounded, applying first aid with the limited supplies available in the aircraft's medical kit. 2 of the rescued men were in serious condition. Without proper medical care, they would not survive much longer. At 1,247 3 hours and 12 minutes after the final takeoff from Kavieng Harbor, the Arkansas traveler touched down at Samurai. Medical personnel rushed to the aircraft as soon as it taxied to the ramp. The wounded were evacuated first, carried on stretchers to waiting ambulances. The others followed, walking unsteadily on legs that had been immersed in salt water for hours. Nathan Gordon climbed out of the cockpit and surveyed his aircraft. The damage was worse than he had realized. Multiple bullet holes peppered the fuselage. The starboard wing showed the scars of a near miss that had buckled the internal structure. The bow turret was jammed at an odd angle, and oil leaked from the starboard engine, cowling in a steady stream. The Arkansas traveler would fly again, but not for several weeks. The aircraft that had saved 15 lives had nearly destroyed itself in the process. The debriefing room at Samurai, filled with intelligence officers, squadron commanders, and medical personnel. Nathan Gordon sat in a metal folding chair and recounted his morning, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting over engine noise and gunfire. 4 separate rescue landings. 15 aircrew recovered. Continuous enemy fire throughout the operation. The intelligence officers wrote everything down. Initial reports would be filed immediately. Higher headquarters would want to know about the rescue, would want to assess whether similar operations could be conducted in other locations. The tactical implications of what Gordon had accomplished extended far beyond a single morning's work. The Distinguished Service Cross was the second highest award for valor the United States Navy could bestow, surpassed only by the Medal of Honor. Nathan Gordon received his notification within weeks, the citation praising his extraordinary heroism and intrepid airmanship in the face of intense enemy fire. But the Navy decided that the Distinguished Service Cross was not sufficient recognition for what Nathan Gordon had achieved. In April 1944, he received word that his award had been upgraded. He would receive the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest recognition for combat valor. The ceremony took place aboard a naval vessel in the South Pacific. Rear Admiral Thomas Kincaid, commander of the 7th Fleet, draped the pale blue ribbon around Gordon's neck and shook his hand. The citation read in full, describing each of the 4 rescues in detail, emphasizing the continuous danger and the pilot's absolute refusal to leave men behind. Lieutenant Gordon's exceptional skill, daring airmanship, and disregard for his own safety, in the face of continuous enemy fire, contributed materially to the rescue of 15 Allied airmen whose planes had been shot down over Kavieng Harbor, the citation concluded. His courageous and determined efforts were in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Nathan Green Gordon was born on September 4th, 1916, in Morrilton, Arkansas, a small town in the central part of the state where cotton was king and the Great Depression had hit harder than most places. His father, William Gordon, worked a small farm outside town, growing cotton and corn in soil that seemed determined to resist every attempt at cultivation. His mother, Eliza, ran the household with the iron will that farm wives developed out of necessity. Nathan was the youngest of 4 children, a position that gave him both advantages and disadvantages. His older siblings had broken the trail for him, establishing the patterns of farm life, school, and work that he would follow. But as the youngest, he was also expected to stay, to take over the farm when his father grew too old to work it, to continue the family legacy that stretched back generations. He had other plans entirely. The boy who would become the Angel of Kavieng discovered aviation through the magazines that occasionally appeared in Morrilton. Copies of popular aviation and flying aces passed from hand to hand until the pages fell apart, filled his head with dreams of flight. He built model airplanes from balsa wood and tissue paper, launched them from the roof of the barn, and imagined himself at the controls of real aircraft, soaring above the Arkansas hills. His father did not understand the fascination. Farming was work, flying was entertainment. A sensible man chose work over entertainment, especially during the hardest years of the Depression, when any job at all seemed like a blessing from God. But Nathan Gordon was not sensible in the way his father understood the word. He was ambitious, restless, determined to see more of the world than Conway County, Arkansas, could offer. He graduated from Morrilton High School in 1934 and immediately began looking for a way out. The University of Arkansas at Fayetteville offered a path forward. Gordon enrolled in 1935, working his way through school with a series of odd jobs that barely covered tuition and expenses. He studied business administration, a practical choice for a young man who might need to find employment in a world still recovering from economic collapse. But his real education happened outside the classroom. The university had a civilian pilot training program, established by the federal government to build a reserve of trained aviators who could be called upon if war came to America. Gordon enrolled immediately, spending every spare hour at the small airfield outside Fayetteville, learning to fly in fabric-covered trainers that barely exceeded 100 miles per hour. He was a natural. The instructors recognized it immediately. Some students fought the aircraft, wrestling with the controls, trying to force the machine to obey their will. Gordon flew as if he had been doing it all his life, anticipating the aircraft's movements, making corrections before they became necessary, developing the instinctive feel that separated adequate pilots from exceptional ones. He earned his private pilot's license in 1940, the same year he graduated from the university. The war in Europe was already a year old. France had fallen to the Germans. Britain stood alone against the Nazi threat. American involvement seemed increasingly likely, and Nathan Gordon knew exactly where he wanted to serve. The Navy accepted his application for flight training in early 1941. He reported to Naval Air Station Pensacola in March, beginning the intensive program that would transform a civilian pilot into a naval aviator. The training was brutal, designed to wash out anyone who lacked the skill, determination, or physical conditioning necessary for combat aviation. Gordon thrived in the demanding environment. The same qualities that had made him restless on his father's farm, the ambition, the desire for challenge, the refusal to accept limitations, served him perfectly in flight training. He mastered each aircraft in turn, from the basic trainers through the more advanced models, always pushing himself to fly better, more precisely, more aggressively than the standards required. He earned his wings of gold in December 1941, just days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor transformed American involvement from speculation to reality. The Navy needed pilots immediately, and Nathan Gordon was ready to serve. The PBY Catalina was not what most new naval aviators dreamed of flying. The aircraft was slow, ungainly, and completely unsuited for the fighter combat that captured public imagination. While other pilots were assigned to Wildcats and Hellcats, Gordon found himself at the controls of a flying boat that could barely exceed 180 miles per hour. But the Catalina could do things no other aircraft in the Navy's inventory could match. It could stay aloft for 24 hours or more, covering vast stretches of ocean that would have exhausted any single-engine fighter. It could land on open water, turning any calm sea into an emergency runway. It could carry wounded men, supplies, or equipment that no fighter or dive bomber could accommodate. Gordon flew his first combat patrols in early 1942, searching the Pacific for Japanese submarines and surface ships. The missions were long, tedious, and occasionally terrifying. A Catalina crew that found an enemy submarine could attack with depth charges and bombs, but a crew that encountered enemy fighters was in serious trouble. VP-34 deployed to the South Pacific in mid-1943, establishing operations at Samurai Island, near the eastern tip of New Guinea. The squadron's primary mission was patrol and reconnaissance, keeping watch over the approaches to the Allied positions in New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Secondary missions included search and rescue, though opportunities for rescue were limited by the tactical situation. Gordon flew mission after mission through the fall and winter of 1943. The Japanese were being pushed back, their defensive perimeter contracting as American forces advanced through the island chains. But the enemy remained dangerous, with significant forces concentrated at key bases throughout the region. Kavieng was one of those bases. Located at the northern tip of New Ireland, it served as a major Japanese stronghold, with substantial air and naval forces protecting the approaches to the main fortress at Rabaul. American strategists had decided that Kavieng needed to be neutralized, its ability to threaten Allied operations reduced through a sustained bombing campaign. The February 15th strike was part of that campaign. Multiple squadrons of medium bombers and attack aircraft would hit the harbor installations, while fighters provided escort and suppression of air defenses. VP-34's role was purely precautionary patrol. The area: be prepared to assist any crew that went down. Hope that assistance would not be necessary. Nobody expected the losses that the morning would bring. The anti-aircraft defenses at Kavieng were more formidable than intelligence had predicted. The first aircraft went down within seconds of the attack beginning. More followed in quick succession. Within minutes, the calm waters around Kavieng were dotted with life rafts, Mae West life jackets, and desperate men who knew that rescue seemed impossible. Nathan Gordon heard the first distress call at 0842. Men were dying in the water, and someone needed to help them. The Arkansas Traveler was approximately 20 miles southeast of Kavieng when the call came in. Gordon checked his fuel, consulted with his crew, and made the decision that would define his place in history. The crew of the Arkansas Traveler had trained together for months before the February 15th mission. They knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, had developed the wordless communication that efficient crews needed to function in combat. When Gordon announced that they were heading into Kavieng Harbor, no one questioned the decision. The 4 rescue landings that Nathan Gordon completed on February 15th, 1944, represent one of the most remarkable achievements in naval aviation history. No other pilot had ever attempted anything comparable, landing repeatedly in an enemy stronghold, under continuous fire, with increasing damage to his aircraft and diminishing chances of survival. The Medal of Honor ceremony in April 1944 transformed Nathan Gordon from an obscure patrol pilot into a national hero. Newsreel cameras recorded the event. Newspapers across America carried the story of the Arkansas farm boy who had flown into an enemy stronghold 4 times to save his fellow airmen. The war continued after February 15, 1944. Nathan Gordon flew additional missions with VP-34, though none would approach the intensity of the Kavieng rescues. He returned to the United States in late 1944, assigned to training duties where he passed on his experience to new Catalina pilots. After the war ended in August 1945, Gordon returned to Arkansas in 1946. He found his new calling in politics, running for lieutenant governor of Arkansas and winning. He served 2 terms, from 1947 to 1951, before deciding that elected office was not his true calling. The decades after the war saw Nathan Gordon build a successful career in business, first in real estate and later in banking. He settled in Morrilton, the town where he had grown up, married, raised children, and became a respected figure in the community. Nathan Gordon died on September 12, 2008, at the age of 92. His funeral was attended by Medal of Honor recipients from across the country. He was buried in Elmwood Cemetery in Morrilton, his grave marked by a simple headstone that gave no hint of the extraordinary morning when he had defied death 4 times to save 15 men. The legacy of Nathan Gordon extends beyond that single morning that earned him the Medal of Honor. His 4 rescues in Kavieng Harbor established a template for combat search and rescue operations that would be refined throughout the Cold War and into the modern era. The principle that Gordon demonstrated that rescue aircraft should venture into extremely dangerous situations to recover downed airmen became doctrine for the United States military. The men he saved went on to live full lives. They married, raised families, built careers, and grew old in a world that would never have known them if Nathan Gordon had made a different decision on the morning of February 15, 1944. Their children and grandchildren exist because a pilot from Arkansas refused to leave them behind. That is the true measure of Nathan Gordon's achievement. Not the medal, not the ceremonies, not the newspaper headlines. The lives that continued because he flew into hell 4 times and brought them home. February 15th, 1944. Kavieng Harbor, New Ireland. 1 Catalina flying boat against an entire Japanese stronghold. 4 landings, 15 rescues, 1 Medal of Honor. The Arkansas Traveler earned its name that morning. Nathan Gordon earned his place in history as the Angel of Kavieng Harbor.